The views expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of this station. Welcome to Insights into Northeast Michigan. This is a Channel 11 News public affairs program dealing with the issues affecting those in the community as well as Northeast Michigan and the state. And now, Insights.
Everybody, welcome to this edition of Insights. I'm Marissa McKay, and today I'll be sitting down with various members of the community to expand upon the recall issue that will be on the general election ballot this November 6th. Joining me first is City Attorney Bill Pfeiffer. Now, Mr. Pfeiffer, let's just go back a few years. And when was the last time the city saw a recall?
Over the years, there's been some talk of recalls. There have been petitions that have been drawn and signatures that have been attained, but there haven't been anything on the ballot for probably at least a decade or so.
Wow, so this is a big issue for the city, not only because it's a recall of 3 city officials, but it's also many of these voters haven't had to vote on this in the past.
That's true. It's unusual. It's unusual for a recall to happen to begin with, but it's even more unusual when you've got 3 out of the 5 members that are being recalled.
Definitely. And now let's talk about some scenarios. So if just the mayor is recalled, what does that mean for the city? What are the next steps that the city will need to take?
If just the mayor is recalled, then the remaining council members would appoint a temporary mayor, and that person would fill out the mayor's position until the February 26, 2013 election.
Okay, and that person running for the mayor, they would have to fill out, as you said, the nomination ballot. They would have to go through the process that a typical election would see.
That's correct. On a temporary basis, the council could appoint one of its own members to serve in the role of temporary mayor, and then the other position would obviously be filled at the time of the election. Yeah, the mayor would be subject to re-election in February.
All right, and let's say that the mayor and 1 councilman are recalled. Is it the same process?
It'd be the same process. The remaining members would still appoint a temporary mayor and a council member to fill that position until those February 2013 elections.
And if all 3 of the city officials are recalled, that's obviously a bit of a different situation because you have some quorum issues. If you could explain that. Yeah,
if that happens, that's a little more difficult because we would be left without a quorum, so we could not conduct business until those positions were filled. The County Election Commission would actually fill 1 position, which would make a quorum. And then that person that's appointed by the County Election Commission and the 2 remaining members would appoint 2 additional members to fill out those terms until that February election.
Okay, and what is the timeline? If all 3 are recalled, by what day or by what time does that election commission need to appoint a quorum?
Well, they have to appoint it pretty quickly. Our charter says that the seat cannot remain unfilled for more than 30 days.
Okay.
So it will be a pretty quick turnaround. And then if once the clerk certifies the election results, and if the election results do result in a recall, then folks would have a certain number of days to file a nominating petition to be placed on the ballot to run for one of those positions.
All right, and so we've gone over the scenarios, but now let's discuss the financial burden, or if there would be a burden to the city for this recall issue. So if all 3 are recalled, would there be a cost to the city of Alpena?
Yeah, whether it's 1, 2, or 3, there'll have to be an election held. And so that election will cost the city. Currently, according to County Clerk Bonnie Fredericks, there are no other things that have been placed on the February election. So right now the city would bear that whole cost, and that cost is around $10,000 plus the cost of printing ballots, some incidental costs there too, and then costs for election workers.
All right, and when you say the city, are you referring to the taxpayers, the city of Alpena taxpayers?
That's correct. The city would bear the cost, and that would come out of our general fund monies.
All right, and now let's discuss the impact that this has had on the community. You yourself sit on city council, you attend city council meetings, you've sort of had a different perspective than some of the other community members who have just watched all this unfold. So tell me, what do you think the impact has been so far on the community?
I think it's been pretty divisive on the community. Whenever a community goes through a recall effort, obviously there are certain folks on one side that are dissatisfied with that particular member's performance, whether it be a single vote or a vote on many different issues. But in this case, the recall of these members is specifically related to the one decision to essentially terminate Thad Taylor's contract. And it's been difficult because Thad was well liked in the community. He was a good ambassador for the city, good ambassador for the community, and most folks say did a good job in his role as city manager. So that's become difficult, but I think all of the members voted the way they thought was appropriate. I think they all voted in good conscience. And so from that perspective, there are many members of the community that support the vote to terminate the contract as well. But ultimately, come November, the community as a whole will decide, and then after that, the city hopefully will be able to pick up the pieces and move forward.
Exactly, and you do bring up the idea of moving forward. Whether or not they are recalled, it's very possible that all three men or one or two of those men will still be on the city council, and it's your hope, I'm sure, that going forward, it is still municipality, there's still city business to be taken care of, that everybody can sort of hopefully put that aside and move forward and still conduct business as usual.
Yeah, I think there's certainly a feeling amongst staff and residents of the city that what's happened needs to be remedied, and whether it's remedied by virtue of recall of these particular individuals or recall of one or two of them, that'll be left to the voters. But I think what's become difficult for the members right now is that everybody's kind of tiptoeing around, dancing around, and trying to avoid any unnecessary disagreements about things. And I think they're still, along with that, trying to vote their conscience as to what's right and what's appropriate. And people can disagree, but they should not be disagreeable. So it's got to the point that it's the community, I think, has felt that things have become disagreeable, and that's never good for a community. And so regardless of the result of that November election, hopefully if the members stay, then the remaining members can put that aside. And hopefully if there are new members that come on, that they can come on with a clean slate, and that the city will move forward. The city will conduct business in an appropriate manner.
Definitely. And just one last thing. The critics of these three city officials and who are pro-recall say that the terminating of Mr. Taylor did cost the city some money. So if you could just explain a little bit about those numbers. Yeah,
there is certainly a cost to that. I mean, there's not only a financial cost, but there's always a cost to morale. There's always a cost to the turnover. There's also a cost to what do we do in the meantime? How do we conduct business? How do we continue to do the city's work when we're a man short, so to speak? And to that extent, the city manager position itself, not only in Alpena but across the state and country, those positions roll over quite frequently. The average life of a city manager is probably between 3 and 4 years. So it's not unusual for there to be a cost to do that, but under the circumstances, there's going to be a search for a new city manager, and there's a cost to doing that. There's obviously the cost of Thad's severance package, which in and of itself is not unusual. I mean, most city managers have a severance package, but in this case, he had a severance package calling for 6 months worth of salary and benefits. So that's a cost that the city's had to continue to pay and not have that service available for Mr. Taylor.
Right, so what I hear you saying is that at the end of the day, the November election can't come soon enough. We do need to move forward as a city and as a council and sort of resolve all of these issues.
Yeah, no doubt in my mind. As being a resident of the city and also being the city attorney, it's hardly a day goes by that I don't have comments from both sides of the aisle as to what they think is fair and right and what should happen. And I think that's become difficult for the city to operate because this cloud is hanging over the city's head. And come November, hopefully, that will be remedied and resolved and people will move forward.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. And if you guys stay tuned, when we come back next time, we will be talking with Cindy Johnson and Ann Fletcher, members of the pro-recall effort. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Insights, everybody. Joining me now are Cindy Johnson and Ann Fletcher, concerned citizens of the recall effort. Now, ladies, let's get right into it. Why the recall?
After the dismissal of Mr. Taylor in April, the community was really concerned. They wanted answers to what had just happened, what was the new direction that they said we were going in. The League of Women Voters came forward and offered to hold a forum, which they did, and Mr. Karshnick didn't even attend. But after the forum, none of the questions were answered that gave the community any sort of relief or, answers to the questions that they have been asking. So that's when we decided to formally form and start working toward a recall. It wasn't a knee-jerk reaction. It wasn't something we started off with. We wanted answers, and we still have not gotten those answers.
All right, and so you've brought up some conduct in office and some actions of these three city officials. So let's talk about those. So you bring up why terminate Mr. Taylor?
That was one of our questions. Why terminate Mr. Taylor? The mayor was on your show last week and talked about several programs, from the airport to the trailhead to snowmobiles in the city, the branding project. All those were projects that Mr. Taylor worked on. So when you look at that and all the things they're touting are all the things that Mr. Taylor did, what was he doing wrong? What is the new direction we're going in? We just still don't know.
Right, and that's something that you as voters and as citizens find unsettling. All right, and moving forward, also, the True North Radio Network and Alpena News submitted Freedom of Information Act requests for these 3 city officials, and I know you did want to discuss some of that information, so would you like to share a little bit of information you found or did not find?
Through the FOIA process, the Freedom of Information Act, Mr. Karshnick absolutely refused to comply with any of it. Mr. Nunley's bank refused to comply. Most of the work that they did on their computers that belong to their employers. The city is now in the process of changing that so that this doesn't happen again. If it's city business, it's going to be done on city computers. We should be able to get that information.
And that's the transparency that your group has been discussing.
That's the transparency. We were able to gather enough information, we believe, that shows that there is wrongdoing. All of that is on our website. If people want to go to that, it's alpenacitizens.webs.com, and everything that we've come across and have is documented on that website. We can talk a little bit about what happened before Mr. Taylor was terminated and after. That leads us to believe they violated the Open Meetings Act.
Exactly. Why don't you start with the before?
Before, about a week or two before Mr. Taylor was terminated, Nunley and Wallagora had a dinner meeting with Mr. Peltier and the mayor has acknowledged that. Days before they terminated Mr. Taylor, there was several texts back and forth between Nunley and Karshnick talking about Mr. Peltier, the mayor going to contact him before, and all this is on our website, before the meeting.
You mean the meeting in which they fired Thad Taylor?
The meeting in which they fired Thad Taylor. That night when they fired Thad, they went into a closed session for 14 minutes. It took them 14 minutes to discuss Mr. Taylor's contract. That's what was on the agenda.
And you're saying that 14 minutes seems a very short amount of time to make a decision that you feel has a very large impact on the city.
Exactly. They came out of that meeting and immediately mentioned Mr. Peltier's name as a replacement. In a couple of weeks he would be put on the agenda. They told the same thing to staff the next morning. And they moved forward at that. Mr. Peltier did submit his application to the city. In it, he submitted it as saying that he submitted it at the request of Mayor Matthew, and he was happy to step in and help the city. In his salary requirements, he said that if he completed the mission in less than a year, they would talk about a bonus. And there were 10 issues that he would complete at the request of the council in the time that they wanted it done.
And this is again this very arbitrary mission and vision that you feel as voters you have never been told.
We have never been told the mission.
It was a predetermined situation to bring in Peltier.
That's what you feel has been told to you from the information garnered from the FOIA requests.
Right.
The citizens came to that meeting on May 7th really upset about the termination of Mr. Taylor, the mention of Mr. Peltier's name. They couldn't put Mr. Peltier in that position as interim city manager because of the outcry. They have tried to backpedal away from that, but we have the documentation. I mean, he was asked to put in his application. They had talked about a mission. They had talked about a bonus with the mission.
So you feel that this information and also the lack of information you say from Mr. Karshnick and from his employer and from Mr. Nunley's employer, it leads you to believe that some events transpired that you think violated the Open Meetings Act. So let me tell me about
Marissa,
that a little bit.
The thing to remember is that if they have nothing to hide, there's no reason for them not to comply with the Freedom of Information Act. And this they refused to do.
And so that also goes back to the transparency that you say that needs to be prevalent in a local government, and you don't think that there is any, and like you say, if there's nothing to hide, why not share?
Well, we find ourselves almost 7 months later, and they're just beginning the process of searching for a new city manager. That's not leadership. That's not planning. If you were going to fire or terminate Mr. Taylor's contract, you had no plan. They did have a plan. They wanted to bring in Peltier, and that fell through, and they didn't have Plan B, and the city finds itself, staff is stressed, trying to do the jobs of more than one person. They're floundering, and still just starting the search for a new city manager 7 months later.
Exactly, and you've also brought up in previous discussions the cost to the city. So if you would like to take some time to discuss your findings on that, you said that you've got your information from City Clerk Karen Hubert's office.
The cost to the city, by the time this is said and done, they had to pay Thad Taylor, and the cost of the interim city manager came to over $76,000. Now the search for the new city manager, they've had to pay $10,000 to the search company, and then all the travel expenses and interview expenses, by the time you add that all on, will probably be close to another $10,000+, depending on how many people they bring in. I mean, each person is going to add more cost to that.
Right. And so at the end of the day, you and your group, the pro recall effort, and as you said, the website, everybody is just disheartened with this local government, and you'd like the recall to take place so you can get some new blood in here and make some changes.
Right, and we do have a very qualified slate of people willing to step up to the plate, and depending on how things go, they'll be ready to go.
All right, and so just to wrap up, if you can just give a concluding statement to our viewers and to the voters out there in the city of Alpena, why should people vote to recall all three of these city officials?
Well, their lack of leadership, their lack of transparency, honesty. When the citizens ask their leaders questions, they should answer those questions. That information should be forthcoming. It hasn't. It still hasn't been. The people who support the recall, the leaders of the recall, the people who support it, the people who circulated the petitions have been harassed by these people. They have been bullied by these people. They have put their names up on their computer. I mean, these people aren't ashamed of what they did. They believe in their community just like we do. We want our government to answer to us, but these people have intimidated these people. The latest thing is at City Council meeting, this last City Council, they took an agenda item that usually just goes right through, and the appointments of two people who support the recall, and postpone them till after the election. And they're just sending another message that if they're still there after the election, that these people will not be appointed to the seats that they have held. One of the persons has had a seat in government for over 30 years.
All right.
This has to stop.
Okay, well, thank you so much for being here today and for sharing your beliefs and your opinions. And when we come back on the next segment of Insights, we will hear from the three city officials up for recall, as well as some members of the community, so stay tuned. Welcome back to Insights, everybody. Now we sat down individually with each of the three city council officials up for recall. Now, Mr. Mayor is joining me first, Matt Walagora. So what do you want to say in response to Ms. Johnson and Ms. Fletcher and just everybody from the pro recall's claims?
Well, about the recall, I think the recall effort has taken everything that's wrong with politics in our country and dumped it right here in Alpena. It's almost become ridiculous. I'd like to put an end to the drama and the conspiracy theories and the false accusations. I want to see growth in Alpena. I want to see improvements and efficiencies in the services. I want to see. I want to be aggressive with economic development. And I can guarantee you that we're moving in that direction. And quite honestly, I truly believe that a recall of me or either of these two councilmen will set us back for years. It's just gotten to that point. Government is doing well. Alpena City government is doing well, and I appreciate the support that I've been given from business owners and community leaders and residents in and around the city that have been waiting for positive momentum like this for a long time. And I certainly hope to continue to be mayor for the rest of my term. And
joining me now is Mr. Karshnick. And Mr. Karshnick, what would you like to say to the City of Alpena voters?
Well, a couple things, maybe more than that. There's been a lot of statements saying that we already had done deal with Peltier, which we did not. We had 5 resumes turned in. They only like to bring up the fact there was 1. There was 5. I had called Mr. Peltier personally and told him that I could not support him simply because him being a county commissioner's administrator probably would divide the city and the county, and we don't need that. So that was a false statement made. My company did give up the emails. They own my computer, own my cell phone, and their policy is not to do that. We have a lot of sensitive stuff with our clients. So that was another lie that was told about us. The next thing was that the cost of this has been blown way out of proportion. We would have had to pay Mr. Taylor for 6 months whether he was here or not. So that's not an extra burden. We paid Greg Sundin $7,800 to take over for 6 months, which he did, and we moved him up to $400 a week as of October 16th. The strange thing is now that Mr. Taylor is no longer here, we're saving at $1,800 a week. Most of his salary and all the benefits are no longer being paid, so it's a big savings to the city. The city also gave up 50% of their pay, the council did, so we more than covered anything for the new search committee. The other thing is that they didn't find anything in the FOIA. They were going to sue us in circus court, and that got thrown out. So it's one lie after another. I've been here 21 years, and I think that I've proved to myself that I have the city first, and I would never do anything to harm the city. I hope the voters come out and vote no on the recall, because we've got a lot of good things going, and unfortunately, Mr. Taylor didn't start them. We did.
And joining us now is Councilman Nunnally. Now, Mr. Nunnally, what do you want to say to the city of Alpena before they head to the polls?
Well, it's you know, this is a difficult time for the city, obviously. Whenever you make a change of this nature, it's not easy on anyone. But here's what I'll tell you, and it's very simply. We are at a critical time in our local economy. We have to make some changes to be able to create revenues and eliminate expenses. And these aren't easy decisions. So I will look you in the eye and I will tell you this, that I made this decision for my hometown because we have to change the direction of our community. It's that simple. I will make this decision 10 times out of 10. I would love to tell you some of the things that occurred during this process, but legally I can't do that. It's that simple. We are governed by laws to protect employees, and once an employee decides that they want a closed session meeting, then we have to honor that. So as much as there's an outcry that we're not being transparent, we don't have a choice in that matter, or we expose the city of Alpena to litigation. It's that simple. So here's what I'll tell my friends and the folks in this community. I will ask you to go out and contact myself, the other city councilmen, and the folks that are running the recall. I actually have made up cards that when I go door to door to folks, I give to them that has my contact information, and it also has the contact information of markjohnhunter.wordpress.com. It has the Alpena Recall folks, because I want you to go out there and read both sides and decide for yourself. Who do you believe? Who do you trust? I will tell you this, I've never been more excited in government, as far as the local government, than I am right now in the opportunities that Alpena has. But we have to decide what direction are we going to go. And in my opinion, it was time to change that direction. No different than you would change a quarterback on a football team that isn't really producing the way that you want. You got to decide who's going to lead your team. And do they have confidence in the direction that you are recommending? And as a coach, I got to make that decision. It's not going to make their mom happy. That quarterback's mom's not going to be happy if you change them. Their friends aren't going to be happy, and I appreciate that. But the fact of the matter is that right now in Alpena, we have great opportunity, but we're at a crossroads. And come November, on Election Day, you're going to get to decide, who do you believe? So I ask that you do your research, check out both sides, and make your decision.
Now we're out in the streets of Alpena talking to community residents about their feelings on the recall.
I think it's important for people to vote in the election. I'm personally ready for it to be over with so our city can move forward. But I do think it's important that people voice their concerns and go vote so we can move forward as a city.
To my understanding, that if we are going to be recalling 3 of our councilmen, that it will leave an opening for quite a while as we search out new councilmen, as well as it's saying that we're challenging our authority, which is fine, but are we going to be constantly challenging them on every decision made? And are we not entitled to our own opinion?
Well, that'll do it for this week's edition of Insights. I'm Marissa McKay, and make sure to stay tuned to Insights next week when Annie Taylor will be sitting down with Ken Hubbard and Peter Battaglia.
Insights into Northeast Michigan has been a Channel 11 News public affairs program. If you have any comments, suggestions, or topics you would like to see on a future show, please email us at the web address on the screen. This has been a production of Thunder Bay Broadcasting Corporation. All rights reserved.